Hello and welcome to the 9th video in this video series of using Godot with C# and the Writer IDE to dynamically create or modify a 3D mesh. In our last video, we did quite a bit. We used the surface tool to replace the cube that was exported out of Blender, and we dynamically created our own mesh using the surface tool. In this video, I'm going to follow up with one of the comments that appeared on my last video, and then I'm going to do some code cleanup, and we are going to implement the beginnings of a selection outline for when we're clicking on the mesh and interactively selecting faces. So I guess the first thing I want to do is kind of fix some clarification that was happening, or make some clarification of confusion. So actually, let's step back for a second. And so this file we're working in now, this main.cs, this is turning out to be quite a big file, and it's getting hard to navigate. And luckily, Writer has tools to help navigate through large projects. So what we would want to do is go up to the View menu and go to Tool Windows, and we would want to turn on the structure. And if we turn on the structure, now we're going to get a list of the methods and variables. And there's two settings up here. Navigate with a single click, and then there's one here that says always select opened element. So this one here, so like we have a method here for pointing the camera, and if I single click on it, the editor doesn't move. But if I double click on it, it takes me to that method. Well, since I'm lazy, I would rather have single click work. So if I click on this thing here, it'll stay pushed down. And so now if I just single click, let's say on input, it immediately navigates to that piece. Second thing is these are listed in the order that they are in the file, and that still makes it kind of hard to find. So what I'm going to do is hit the A to Z thing here, and what it's going to do is then alphabetize the variables and methods so that I can just quickly inspect here alphabetically where I'm looking to go. And this is going to help get around the file. And this one here, we don't necessarily need that one turned on, but what that one would do is, so like if we go down to, let's pick a different method here. So we're going to create an assign cube mesh. If we click in here, you notice that this structure, it doesn't automatically go to that point. So if I click on this, it'll do that. In fact, let's go to a different method. So here's the ready. Up here I was actually an input. But if I click in ready, watch over here. See, it'll eventually pop down there. And that makes it very nice to navigate around this big file. So I think this is useful to have up here now. And if one doesn't like this here, if one clicks on this gear and then goes to move to, one can move it to different parts of the interface. I'm on the right top right now, and that's where I like this, but you could put it down here or in the center, or you could put it in lots of places, but I like it here, so I'm going to leave it here. Okay, so the confusion that, and that's, I apologize, I think I was trying to get overly verbose, and I think it confused the issue. So in our create an assign cube mesh method, what I ended up doing is I created this big set of arrays, and then at the end there, since I didn't know an easy way to combine them together, I was doing this next index and copy to, and this isn't very efficient anyway, but it just, after reading the comment from a person from the last video, you know, this probably wasn't the best way to do this. In fact, it wasn't. It was confusing. So why don't we just go ahead and quickly fix that so we don't have to worry about this being a sticking point of understanding. So what we're going to do is we're going to just go ahead and we're going to just use the final faces vertices to define all these faces, period, like in one big chunk. So what we're going to do here, so we can equals. So what we're going to do here is we'll just put a comment to let us know. This was the front face. Whoops. See? Well, front side. We'll put comments in here so we know what we're doing. So we put a comma here. I'm going to even put a carriage return there. So this was back side. And then we'll do top side. And bottom side. Left side, not left, left. And finally, right side. So this is what I should have done to begin with, and I apologize. That way the comments here make it clear which triangles, each line here is a triangle, and each pair of triangles will be a carriage return between them. This is a face. And these comments make it clear enough, so I should have done this from the get-go. So because of that, we don't need this, and we don't need all this copy crap, so we can just do that. And that should make this make a lot more sense. So that fixes that. That's fantastic. Okay, so the next thing I want to address here is, remember on the last video when we were running the game. In fact, I'll do that now. And I mentioned in the scene area, when the game runs, you'll get this remote thing. And let me scoot this out of the way. Well, you noticed with the when you clicked on remote, and it would show the at runtime what was happening. And like you see this immediate mode or immediate geometry node, but it has this kind of useless name. And when you go into meshes and cube, I mean, the cube collision, you can probably figure that one out, but then you've got these two immediate geometries, and it's like, well, which one is the wire mesh and which one's the normal? And I'm thinking we should probably name these a little bit so that we can inspect these here, because we're gonna start needing to know how to pull these things out at some point, and they're gonna have to have known names. So why don't we go ahead and go into Writer. And so what we want to do is we want to create some constants at the top of this file. So what we want to do is create some names for the axes, the cube static body, the face normal immediate geometry, and the wireframe immediate geometry. And then we're going to have a new one called selected immediate geometry, and that's going to be, it's going to highlight a face when we select it. We're not going to implement the click code that does that, but we'll just arbitrarily highlight a face to show how it will work when we get this in place. So right here, why don't we just go ahead and we'll create a constant up here, and we'll call this, it'll be a string, and we'll call this thing axis immediate geometry name. And let's just call it axis immediate geometry. Yes, I know that's not very original, but it'll be easy to figure out what's going on. So then we want to have the cube static body name, and we'll just call this the, and we'll just call it the cubic static body. And then we have that face normals one, so we will call this one face normals immediate geometry, and we will make the name face normals immediate geometry. And then finally the wireframe. will highlight that, copy, and paste. All right. So now we have these names defined. So let's go ahead on when we're creating these things and let's assign them. So first, let's go to the draw axes. And what we would do is basically when we have this immediate geometry we're creating, axes, immediate geometry, yeah. So then we would just give it a name, and the name we're giving it is that. And that's all we have to do. So that takes care of the axes one, and then when we were creating and assigning the cube, we want to assign a name to that static body. So if you remember from the last video, what we were doing is we were pulling out the first child, which after this create convex collision call, it would make a child underneath the cube mesh instance. So since we have a handle for the cube static body here, all we have to do is the same thing. So cube static body dot name, and we just assign it to that constant. And then we want to do the face normals, so we go to draw face normals. And, oh, I guess it's on the screen here. I'm like, why didn't it jump? And so we're going to look for the immediate geometry, which is here. And we want to name that face normals immediate geometry name. All right. And then the final one is the wireframe, draw wireframe. So we'll jump down there. And we'll look for the immediate geometry, and we'll set the name to wireframe immediate geometry name. So that should all be set now. So let's go to Godot and let's run the game. And it's not going to change any real functionality of the game, but now when we go, let's get this off the screen a little bit, we go to this remote now. You can already see the cube static body. Let's make this a little bit wider. The cube static body now has a name. You can tell which immediate geometry this is, which immediate geometry this is, and then obviously this is the axis immediate geometry here. So again, you know, it doesn't change the functionality, but now it's very clear what these things are called, and I think that that's useful for later. Okay, so what we want to do here, let me just run the game again. So what we want to do here is set this up so that when we, let's say, click on this face, it's going to highlight this triangle in a different color, and that way we'll know it's selected. And we're going to do that with an immediate geometry. So because of that, why don't we go back to Writer, and let's create a name for that because we've been naming these things, right? So let's go ahead and call this thing, I guess we'll call it selected. Selected immediate geometry name, and we will call the thing okie dokie. So now what we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to create a function for that, or a method for that. So the question is, you know, where do we want to put that, at the beginning of the file or the end? The good thing is it doesn't matter now, because since we have this structure here in Writer, I mean, it doesn't matter where we put it. So I think what I'm going to do, I think I'm just going to scroll to like toward the bottom of the file, and like right here, I'll just put it here. So we want to make a new method, and what we're going to do is we're going to want to call this, let's call it draw selected outline, and let's fix the spelling there. Okay, so this is going to be very similar, at least initially, to the wireframe code. It's going to be a lot simpler than that, though. So let's just go ahead and copy this wireframe code, but we're going to really simplify this. So we're going to paste it in. So what we want to have come in here is we want to have, as a parameter for this method, we want to have an integer coming in that's going to tell us which face in the mesh is selected. And then based on that number, it will draw that highlighted thing. So what we want to do here is we're going to want to rename this immediate geometry to not the wireframe, but the selected one. And everything here should be the same. Now, here's the thing. Now, if you remember, when we were doing these immediate geometries, we were going in line mode, which allowed us to draw the wire mesh, or even the axes. We were drawing lines to and from. As you can see with the code we copied here, we were basically giving it a, this is the A to B, B to C, C back to A. You were giving it pairs of things. Well, we want the selection to be a colored in thing. So basically that triangle, we want it filled in. So we don't want to do lines. We want to actually fill in the triangles. So we're actually going to go into a different mode. We're going to put immediate geometry into triangles mode. And then what color do we want to do here? Well, let's try purple. I think purple might do a decent job working against the green and the yellow wireframe mesh that we have. So what we want to do here now is we're going to get a face coming in, and then we want to get what vertice that starts at. So that's actually going to be pretty easy. So what vertice, again, we have the cube mesh instance, and we get the mesh from that, which is that cube we defined. And then the get faces gives us a big, long, an array of vertices, and each 3 is a triangle. So every 3 is going to be a face. So like if this selected face was 0, then it would be 0, 1, and 2. If the selected face is 1, it would be vertices 3, 4, and 5. So what we want to do here is kind of give us a starting index that we can work with based on the selected face. So what we're going to do here is let's just create a variable that's called starting vertex. And what would that be? Well, I think that would be selected face, which again is this parameter coming in, and we'll just times it by 3, because every 3 vertices is a face, right? So then what we want to do here, we don't want a for loop. What we want is we're just going to outright just define the triangle. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an immediate geometry dot add vertex. And what vertex are we going to add? Well, it's going to be vertices, and it's going to be the starting vertex. And let's set up 2 more of these, because again, we're in triangle drawing mode, so we have to give 3 points. Well, it's just going to be a +1 and a +2, just like we were doing for the wireframe. We were drawing line by line. And then that's the end of that. And we'll keep the same scale factor as the cube mesh so that it bumps out the same. And we'll add it. So in theory, when this is all set to go, we're not actually calling it yet. This is the code we would call if what we're going to do in the next video, where we're actually going to click on a triangle and let us know which triangle we clicked on, then we could call this. But we can pretend that we know how to do that. So what we can do is we can go back to the ready method. And what we can do is after, because again, these immediate geometries are kind of drawn on top of each other. So the last drawn is going to be the one on top. So we have to make sure it's after the create and assign cube mesh. It depends if we want it underneath or on top of the wireframe stuff. Why don't we put it at the end of all this stuff? And so what we're going to want to do here then is we're going to do a call to draw selected outline. Well, we don't know what face. Let's just say the 0 face. If you remember from our last video, the 0 face would be the very first triangle we defined, which should be in the upper right corner. So let's take a look at that. I'm I'm seeing an error here. What am I missing? Because I'm seeing this red squiggle here. So I'm trying to figure out what it's not happy with. Let's go back to the draw selected outline. There's a good chance it's there that it's not happy with. I don't see the problem. Something at the top. Well, let's just run it, and Godot will tell us what it's not happy with, and then we'll fix it there. So let's run the game. Okay, so it definitely is not happy about something. Let's make this smaller. 345, line 345. All right, so let's go to line 345. Oh, yep, it sure did. I forgot the semicolon there. All right. Okay, so the red squiggle's gone, so excellent. So let's now run the game now. And it should give us, and it did. See how that triangle, that's the first triangle we defined, which would be the 0th triangle, that's purple. So if we close this up, like this is the first triangle. So that's 0 index, that's 1. So let's change that from 0 to 1, and we would expect this bottom one to be purple. So let's go ahead and do that just so we can feel comfortable that this is working. So let's go back to ready. And let's go to the bottom here and change this to a 1. And let's go back to Godot. Let's run, and it should be that bottom left corner. Look at that. Perfect. So what this is going to be is that's going to turn purple. Like in our next video, we're going to click there, and then it's going to highlight the triangle. So if I clicked there, it would make that purple. If I click there, it would make that top face purple. If I click there, it would make that purple. So we don't have the code yet to detect which face we're clicking on, but now at least we have the code that can color something that purple when we want it. So that's, I think, the a good first step to get to that point. So I'm going to leave. I think I'm going to stop the video here because I think this is that last video was over an hour long, and I think this one's going to be a much more reasonable watch. So instead of trying to do everything in one big video, I'm going to try to break this up. So that's it for this video. And in our next video, I'm going to walk through implementing the code. So when we click, it'll highlight a face, and it'll tell us which face is been highlighted, so that we know what the selected face is, and then we can, if we decide, let's say, to extrude it out, we'll know which face we're going to extrude. So I'm going to end the video here. I hope to see you all really soon. Take care.